Hi everybody, welcome to what will be a longer chapter in our discussion when we're talking about adult and teacher development in our school system. This is going to be the only chapter that you look at in all of our text and all of our programs, unless you're taking a social foundations class, that really looks at adult learning. So it's important. It's important that we understand it from a supervision context, and it's important that you understand it as somebody who's eventually going to be in charge of managing multiple people that are adults in your district and in your building. So I think this is important. I want you to use it in the context of what you're supervising and try to look at it when you're defining your role as an instructional supervisor and as an instructional leader in your programs. So let me give you some scenarios to start. We have Judy Jones. She's a great fourth grade teacher. She goes to her class, tells her students, I want to involve more students in our class. So I'm going to really focus on kids that are 75 miles down the road that are in Stillwater. And I'm going to teach in Tulsa. And I'm not going to be in the building. I'm not going to be in the room. I'm just going to run a video camera and they're going to learn with me. Would that work in fourth grade? How about this? Judy has another idea because Judy's brilliant. And she tells her students, I don't want to meet every day. I'm only going to work 3 days a week. That's it. You're going to go work from home and go online and take class Tuesday and Friday. And as fourth graders, I believe in you. And I know you're going to come and you're going to log on and you're going to use our learning management system and you're going to work from home. Would this work? So I get in a problem when people tell me that adults and children learn the same way. They don't. I do not believe this. I'm an extreme supporter of adult learning theory and customizing courses and educational opportunities for adults. If I weren't, then I wouldn't be giving you weeks where we're sitting here watching videos like we are right now. So about me, just to kind of give you a little bit of background about me and why I'm teaching college and teaching doc classes and graduate programs at such a young age. I began teaching college when I was 24 years old. I started in 2005. I had a skill set that not everybody had. I was at the right place at the right time. The state of Pennsylvania was very big on this Microsoft Office User Specialist exam. And it was this test that really tested your ability to use Office software, to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access. I was a handful of people that could actually pass the Access one. There were very few people in the state that had computer programming background and database management. I did, and I was able to pass the Access test. So when people were credentialing them, they were credentialing people to teach microcomputer applications and to teach Access and PowerPoint and Word and Excel. So I had the credential that not a lot of people had, so I got my foot in the door because I had all of them, and I was able to do this job. And it got me teaching college sooner than a lot of other people did. So I was teaching at a community college and I was teaching at a university part-time while I was a high school teacher. And it was a learning experience for me. I was teaching Excel to 9th graders. I was teaching C++ first, then Visual Basic, and then Java to 11th and 12th graders. Then, on Saturdays, I would have to teach an adult learner who needed to know how to use a mouse for their job, how to use a mouse. So I learned that certain people were going to learn differently and adults were going to learn differently than children were. Myself, I got more satisfaction out of teaching adults than I ever did in K-12. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I knew what my role was and I knew what my best fit was. I could be sarcastic, I could be snarky, but I could still teach, which I enjoy teaching a lot, but I could do it in the way that I wanted to. About 3 years after that, I was out of public school education K-12 completely and moved into adult learning, which is why I'm working at the college level. I think about it now, and I have more experience teaching college than I do with public schools, than teaching children. But I made that transition very early on in my career. I built it from the ground up, and I thought it was something that fit me and suited me better. So why did I tell you this story? Why did I make you listen to that? Well, I want you to know that there's a different way to teach adults than there are K-12 students. Adult learners have different expectations, and they need to have more flexibility. We should not put as much control on adult learners because life happens that we do on K-12 learners, because we're going to make sure that they're going to get the supports that they need when they need them. This is the only chapter only chapter in alternative certification that actually goes over adult learners. And you'll get some if you take social foundations in the master's degree. The master's degree is going to give you the option, you'll have to take the research methods class, and then you take qualitative or quantitative. The qualitative class is social foundations, and it's going to give you information on adult learners. I think this is one of the longer presentations you'll see, but it's important, and it's something you need to consider strongly as you move forward as a future school administrator. So, adult learning, different from children learning, didn't even get discussed until the late 1920s. It was basically from the work of Thorndike saying that learning didn't peak in youth and diminished steadily thereafter, meaning that we could teach adults and they could learn something. And then this led to discussion on different types of intelligence, which, as you all know, this comes from the work of our glorious friend Howard Gardner. He's known for the multiple intelligence theory, which you've had in your undergrad, you've had in your grad programs, you're going to have in your doctorate program. You will never ever avoid multiple intelligence theory. Ironically, we watched him speak about a year ago, and he wanted to speak about things that weren't the multiple intelligence theory. He wanted to move past multiple intelligences, but this is what he's defined for, and this is what he is as a person in his research. You can't say multiple intelligences without saying Howard Gardner. He basically stated that individuals have 8 different types of intelligences, and they can be used to improve their intellectual capacity. So you want to think about these in terms of both students and teachers, and we're going to look at it from both perspectives as we talk about them. So I give you the definitions of them. Take about 15 seconds to look at the first 4. And take about 15 seconds to look at the next 4. So now we will engage these theories a little bit more and talk about the intelligences in form of what they are and what they offer. So the notion of linguistic intelligence is the ability to speak or write creatively and with relative ease. English is the subject that favors these students the most. Pretty much everything that they do is geared towards writing in English, or reading, but reading related to writing. But it is important to note that a good teacher in any subject can have writing across the curriculum, which was a huge movement that came out of the 80s and has since continued. So teachers can be integrating this into all of their classes, and students that have linguistic intelligence can learn writing better. Logical mathematical intelligence, these are people that have strong reasoning skills and engage in math and scientific inquiry. They're going to have high skills in math and sciences, and can explain why something works and the theory behind it. You're going to find this a lot in, obviously, your math and science courses, but you can obviously integrate math into music as well. Think about music as one giant math problem, and students do well on that. Art has mathematical qualities to it as well. So try to find ways to integrate math and learning into the student experience and evaluate your teachers as to whether or not they are doing it. So spatial intelligence, this is basically people that are good at design. This is another no-brainer. I think you can integrate design in all of your teachers' lessons, and I think there are students that are going to learn well that are able to actually design and visually depict something rather than write it. Musical intelligence, music can be a part of any classroom environment. Some students do well with music. If they do, put it on in the background while they're working, allow students to pick different types of music, and integrate it into some of the work that the students are doing in the classroom. Good teachers can do this as well. For people with high bodily kinesthetic intelligence, they're going to be able to use their body and physical abilities to solve problems. One of the things that you're going to see in K-12 education now, really more at the first, second, and third grade level, is this notion and this idea of a brain break. So what is a brain break? A brain break is when we're going to stop class and we're going to stretch, and you're going to jump up and down 5 or 6 times, and you're going to put your left hand up and you're going to stretch it all the way down. If a student, especially in your younger grades, if the kids are sitting and they're not not learning or they're not engaged. You stop, you draw a card, you say brain break, everybody's going to jump up and down 5 times. It gets them going, it gets them moving, it gets blood flowing, it gets them energy, it also gets them talking to each other too. And that can help them as well. Good teachers will build this in. I did it teaching 9th grade. If I saw that my students were dead, I would just take them on a walk around the building. I said, okay, we're going to go outside, we're going to go on a walk. So I use bodily kinesthetic intelligence for that. So interpersonal intelligence, this is the idea to understand other people. You can do this. You can do this with different classmates on a regular basis. You can have students sit in groups. When evaluating teachers, see if the teachers are actually doing group work. We know as adult learners that we're going to have times when we sit down and we discuss things in groups. But it's also important too that we expect our students to do it as well. Think about how important interpersonal intelligence is right now in education. I'm teaching a school reform class that really looks at the professional learning community. So all of that is really interpersonal intelligence and building social skills. So PLCs can be integrated into this, and they can be part of the model as well. So intrapersonal intelligence, this is why we let our teachers reflect. Students should reflect, teachers should reflect. Every class that you teach should have some sort of reflection component in it. Every class that a student has, they should be able to reflect on what they learned. Good teachers can tell you as a principal what went right in a lesson, what went wrong in a lesson. The problem is you have to find a way to reward teachers for this and help them use it to better themselves and better their practice, which I argue is much easier said than done. The last of Gardner's intelligence was added very recently, and it was this idea of naturalistic intelligence. He's also started to add the 9th intelligence, which is spiritual, but naturalistic intelligence really is, implementing nature, implementing outdoors in education, planting trees, going outside and having class. I think going outside and having class can be a good idea sometimes. You can integrate that easily into the elementary grades, and it can really open up the doors for just interacting and relaxing, and some children do a lot better with this type of learning environment. So we're going to look at all 3 of the learning theories in depth that are related to adult learning. We have the Knowles theory, the self-directed learning theory, and then we have the transformational learning theory, and we're going to talk about each one of these. So Malcolm Knowles had 5 basic assumptions of adult learning. Basically said that adults should be self-directing, meaning that adults really have to be on their own, and if they're given initiatives, they can learn things that they need to do on their own, and we need to have trust in them, and we need to have faith in them. Number 2, I think, is important. I think you have to take a look at the experience that adults have and use that experience to help them in their learning situations. Give them the opportunity to solve real-life problems when it presents itself. Make them performance-centered in their orientational learning. They want results, they want feedback immediately, and if they want to learn, they're going to learn, because learning is primarily intrinsically motivated, but they have to want to do it in order for it to actually happen and for it to make some sort of change. So, supervision. This is important. Teachers all want to do well when supervised. So you as the supervisor, and I've said this over and over, and I will continue to say this over and over again until the day that I die in this class, your goal and your responsibility as a supervisor is to supervise your best teachers first, because they expect to do well. Most people will become teachers because they think they are good at it. Even teachers that are bad teachers think that they are good teachers. This in itself is a problem as well. Teachers want immediate feedback from their supervisors, meaning after an observation occurs, they want to be told, this is what I did right, this is what I did wrong, and they want that feedback to be immediate. Most teachers want the benefit of the doubt the first time something goes wrong. So if there's a bad observation, you owe it as a supervisor to those teachers to supervise them a second time, just to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. The self-directed learning comes from Alan Tuff, basically saying that adults learn on their own and don't necessarily need the benefit of an instructor to learn. Some of you could take a book, this book for instance, read it on your own and be fine. I would argue of the 3 books in this class, this is probably the toughest one to do because it's really tied to theory, and my goal as the instructor of this book is to really give you videos that link the theory and explain it. My goal here is lecture. For when we're looking at the Glickman book, I am lecturing, and that's what I should be doing. For the Sullivan and Katcher book, I'm going to lecture too, but I'm more worried about you taking those books and applying them to practical contexts. And if you can't, then you're not using those books effectively. This is a theory book, and I think some people need the guidance to support it and to grasp what it means and what it stands for. So then we have transformational learning theory that basically says that people have life events, and these are things that change the way that they learn and the way that they're capable of learning. When one of those life events occurs, it can increase their capacity to learn, or it could decrease their capacity to learn as well. And the note that I always make that I think is important, if I think something is bad, the teacher might think it's awesome, and they might want to do it in their learning activities. The example that I always use when I talk about this, it's the idea of popcorn reading in elementary schools. Think about popcorn reading. If I was person A and I would say, the work of Mesereau, which has replaced the work of popcorn, John, and then John would start reading at Nola's. That was a very popular method of teaching reading in reading instruction in the 80s and 90s. And some of you that are watching this video probably learned how to read using this method. Now, we look at this and we say, well, what was the point of stopping here? They didn't stop at the end of the paragraph. They might have been trying to pick on John and give him a word that he couldn't pronounce. So are the students doing anything more than learning how to pay attention, or are they learning how to read? So I would consider that to be bad practice, but if I was working with a teacher from the 80s or 90s, they might think that's good practice. So that creates a challenge as well when we're relating this to transformational learning. So we have three different types of learning. This notion of situated cognition, we'll give you the definition for this. This is really saying that if you have authentic experiences, you learn what you're doing. For this class, that's 100% true. You're going to be using the Sullivan text to come up with one of those instruments for a walkthrough, and you're going to have an authentic activity embedded. So the first time you use that observation form, it's going to be hard, but then it's going to get easier the more that you use it. Informal learning isn't structured, but it's intentional. It's something that you pick up just by doing or by experiencing. And incidental learning can happen. You learn something about science when you're learning about English. You're reading a famous piece of literature and it has a fact on science. So that's incidental learning. You learn something related to the subject you weren't trying to do, and it might be unconscious learning as well. So incidental learning happens when somebody was exposed to something over and over again. In the context of Oklahoma, I sat in on all of these sessions on what the Tulsa teacher evaluation system is supposed to look like. And one of the things that I was told was that 68% of all teachers are average. And I've heard that figure over and over and over again, and I will never forget it. 20 years from now, wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to remember that the Tulsa Public Schools evaluation system said that 68% of all of our teachers are average. So that experience was something that stuck with me. That's incidental learning. I was there to learn the model, but I also learned that their perception was this average teaching. We're going to learn most of what we learn through experiences, whether they're positive or negative, and the more we experience something, the more we're going to remember it, and the more the more we're going to do what we need to do with it. So I think supervision is something that has to be perfect, especially when you're dealing with bad teachers. Remember what we said in the first week of this class, that all teachers think that they're good teachers. That's a problem. This is why the most important and effective thing that you can do as a supervisor is supervise the best teachers first. Any teachers that you know you are not going to have problems with when you're starting out, they need to be supervised first. If you have a good mentor principal, you can have them do the more challenging teachers first until you get comfortable, but start out with the best and most perfect teachers first so you get experience, because you know that if you make a mistake on their evaluation sheet, it's not going to mean anything because they weren't going to get disciplined anyway. However, if you make a mistake on a teacher you're trying to discipline, there really is no room for mistakes. You have to be perfect. So please think about that and please consider that. So the other issue is this idea of holistic learning. Some people have learning and look at it in terms of spirituality. This can come in the form of spirituality and narrative inquiry, and it's good for the interconnectedness and the understanding of the world. And I think